So, when it comes to the actual stigma of divorce, there's a really big stigma about it. Whenever you think about it, you think of a lot of arguing, you think of a lot of lawyers and fighting and custody battles and payments, but it doesn't have to be like that. Sometimes it's really just coming up to an understanding that things are over and there's still a whole life to live after that. There's kids involved, and there's going to be lots of situations where they're going to require both parents to be there. And it's always great to have both parents in their lives. So why not, as opposed to trying to think of divorce as a negative thing, try to use it as an opportunity to grow and to maybe recreate a new dynamic between the two of you where the parents can get along and provide that togetherness to the kids as they live separately. The other thing too that we're hoping to address as well, seeing it from two different perspectives. I mean, he was the husband in the relationship, I was the wife. And so we both had our own perspectives on it. There were different challenges that we both faced. We're going to hopefully be able to see the commonalities and the things that we worried about based on who we are, where we were in our lives, what was going on, and how it is that we address those challenges and those needs while trying to maintain that healthy co-parenting relationship. So Jay, what do you think? I guess.
Well, I'll just go back to, I just wanted to go back to the stigma of divorce and
Sure.
really discuss that. I mean, I think, that's one of the things that really affected me when we first got divorced. It was just so hard to explain to people and really make them understand that this is what we really want. And because of the stigma that's attached to divorce, it's embarrassing, right? It's very emotional, even for the kids, them talking to their friends and having to explain to their friends that, oh, I'm at daddy's house, or, oh, I'm at mommy's house.
Hmm.
Whenever I hear my kids talking to their friends about that kind of stuff, the stigma kicks in, right?
Yes.
And it's like this disgusting feeling inside where I feel like I have to put my kids through extra pressure to try to explain to their friends why they have two houses, right? And that's what really hurt me the most. I mean, the stigma attached to divorce, with other adults, I know a lot of people who are divorced. So it wasn't like it didn't really affect me in a huge way. I mean, it was emotional and it's hard to explain to people, because we did have a great facade that we didn't have any problems in our relationship and everything was hunky dory when underneath the hood, we had a lot of issues.
Yeah, like everybody was shocked out
Right.
that we were getting divorced. They were like,
Right.
"What?" Yeah,
Right.
totally.
So it was very difficult to explain to people what happened. How did we get to this point? And again, there's always that stigma that's attached to it where it's kind of embarrassing to tell people that you're divorced, even though it is very common in 2023 that people get divorced. There's still this lingering stigma that's attached to it. And it's very difficult to deal with. I had a 6-month contract position and I didn't even disclose the fact that I was divorced because of the stigma attached to it. It's just difficult. It's a personal thing. I don't necessarily like to share. Now, if somebody asked me if I was married, I would for sure say, no, I'm divorced. But, when nobody really asks those kind of questions, and you just pretend, yeah, Steph is taking the kids to swimming with her parents this weekend. It's really exciting. Or we're going to the beach this weekend. And nobody really realized I was a divorced man because I didn't
Yeah.
want the stigma that's attached to that. And, people to kind of prejudge me because it was a contract job and I was doing consulting. So I just didn't want people to attach that negative stigma to me. So, I mean, again, the stigma really affects us in a lot of ways. And it's pretty sad that we can't just be honest and kind of open up to the world and say, hey, I'm divorced without receiving some kind of like, oh, what happened? How did it happen? Whose fault was it?
And I think it also has to deal with the fact as well that the type of families that we come from too are pretty traditional. Divorce is kind of taboo and it's seen as something really, really terrible. It kind of almost feels like the world is ending when you tell people, right? I totally understand that for sure. I get that. Like it is a really, really heavy topic. And a lot of the time people think that it just ends at just that situation, but it's one of those decisions that you make that alters your life forever, and it's not like one of those simple breakups where you could just kind of walk away. You have to find a way to work together, right? Especially if you want to have both parents involved in their lives, right?
And that's one of the things I really want to restate to the listeners. Like I want to take the stigma out of divorce. And when people hear, oh, I got divorced, they always go to the worst case scenario. Oh, there was mental abuse, there was, physical abuse or stuff like that.
Or
Today,
cheating or
yeah, exactly. Infidelity.
Mhm.
But today, I think a lot of divorces are just people fall out of love or grow in two separate ways, right? Or your goals change, right? What they want out of life changes, stuff like that. And I know they're simple things, but usually when somebody hears divorce, they always think of the worst case scenario, which is a big part of it, which is why I'm afraid to tell people sometimes, that I'm divorced. I mean, obviously, if the person needs to know it, then I'll bring that information forward, but I don't just say, hey, my name is Jay, I'm divorced. It's not a badge I wear on my arm proudly.
Yeah, it's like one of those things, like every time you're asked about why it was that you got divorced, it's almost like every time you have to answer that question, it almost feels like you're reliving it for that moment. And I already went through this once, and every single time that they've asked me, why did you guys get divorced? It's like I have to rehash it again. I'd rather just not and just focus kind of like of where we are at this point. Talk to me about how it is that we're able to be in the same room and be cool with each other and talk to each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just really establishing a new dynamic, essentially. I mean, we have 2 kids, and it's just people always want to know like the gossip.
I mean, after 5 years, 6 years of being divorced, it's not something that, I have a script ready, right? But I still don't like telling the script.
Of course.
Um,
Absolutely.
Even though we don't have any bad blood between us and, people see us together all the time and they're like, oh, I didn't even know you guys were divorced.
Yeah.
I get that a lot. But again, it's one of those things where it's personal and sometimes it's hard to retell the story, even though I've told it 100 times.
Yeah, totally. I hear that.
hmm
100%.
The stigma thing, man, I wish, the world just looked at divorced people differently.
Yeah, for sure. It's really difficult because, I mean, after divorce, it's almost like going up to a woman and ask her, like, why don't you have kids yet? It's one of those questions that it's like, don't ask. It's like you don't know what the deal is there. You know what I mean? It's like, just don't ask. You don't know the reason why they got a divorce. It could be really personal. It could be something really bad. It could be something that hurt a lot of people. It's impactful. There's still pain there. There's a lot of stress. There is a lot of things, right? And at the same time, it's not only situational. Now it's like, okay, so now we've got the divorce and now we have to start rebuilding our lives. And while we're rebuilding our lives, we have to answer these questions, which doesn't help with trying to find serenity after divorce, right? So it's just understanding like, oh, you're divorced? Okay, cool. And just understanding that the rest of it really isn't their business,
Yeah, for sure.
for
There's
sure.
people come in and out of your life and they have a right to know. If they want to understand how you're in this situation, you tell them. But the randos the person that you haven't seen in 20 years, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I heard that you got divorced. What happened? Like, I haven't seen you in 20 years. And all of a sudden the second question you ask me is why I got divorced.
Yeah.